Yes.
Okay, so we have the pleasure and honor to have Bob Tarjan today, all the way from Princeton University. And Bob is a recipient of the Turing Award, and I learned on Wikipedia that he's the first ever recipient of the Nevelina Award. And of course, super famous for very fundamental graph algorithms and data structures and Fibonacci heaps. And today we will hear about another fundamental problem solved.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry to be a little late here. It's a hectic day. Happy to be here. Today I want to talk about a simple problem. Simple solution illustrates many things. Sorting. So this is joint work with Bernard Hoypler, who was a visiting master's student in 2007, roughly. I ran into him again in 2023 visiting ETH in Zurich. And he asked me a different question, but eventually it led to work I'm going to talk about with his group, which includes several students and postdocs. He has now joined half-time a new institute in Sofia, Insight, which is trying to build up computer science research in Bulgaria. So interesting. Let me just start with some very general observations. So computer science is a young field. We've been designing algorithms for at least 6 decades, maybe a little more, depending on how you count things. We've developed lots of beautiful and theoretically efficient algorithms and data structures, but it's still a young field. Sometimes we've settled for the first good enough solution. And sometimes we've strived for theoretical efficiency at the cost of simplicity. I have discussions with my colleagues all the time about conference program committees favoring complexity for complexity's sake or complication for complication's sake, rather than paying attention to simple things. The design space for algorithms is very rich, and it only gets richer as computers get faster, memories get bigger, we get multiprocessors, we get memory hierarchies. There are lots of things to explore, and we ought to do the exploration systematically. So my goal, one of my goals in research, is to try to come up with the simplest possible efficient methods to solve basic problems. Paul Erdős, who was a famous and interesting mathematician, had this idea of proofs from the book. This is the book in the sky. In fact, there is a book with this title, Proofs from the Book. It gives examples of mathematical proofs that the authors claim are from this book in the sky. So the goal here is to come up with algorithms that are as simple as possible, with provable resource bounds for important input classes and efficient in practice. Something like this was attributed to Einstein. I don't know if he actually said it, but make everything as simple as possible, but not simpler. Don't oversimplify, but simplify to the extent you can. And in the case of algorithms, we are happy, or I am happy, with a simple algorithm, even if its correctness proof or its efficiency analysis is complicated, because the programmer just needs to know that the algorithm is correct and efficient. But the programmer has to be able to write the code and get the algorithm to run. All right, and one thing that plays an important role in lots of computer science is data structure. So a data structure is just a way of storing a collection of items subject to certain query operations, that is, lookups of values or something associated with data, and update operations. Typically in data structures, we're doing a long sequence of operations rather than just a single operation. We care about the cost of the entire sequence. We can transform many graph problems, other combinatorial problems, into a problem of choosing the right data structure. I will give you one example of that in this talk. So here comes the problem. This is standard sorting, sorting by binary comparisons. We're given a set of items selected from a totally ordered set. We want to arrange them in total order, increasing order, using binary comparisons. So we compare two items and we get back the answer. One is smaller than the other one. This is one of the rare problems in computer science for which there is a non-trivial lower bound. We have to look at all the data. So it's going to take us order n time to sort. But more than that, if we're restricted to using binary comparisons, or more generally binary decisions, a binary decision can only split the set of candidates into two pots. So we need to do enough splitting so that no matter what the path is, no matter what the sequence of answers is, there's only one possible order after we've answered all the questions. There are n factorial possible permutations, possible inputs. So we need at least binary log of n factorial. It's about n log n comparisons to sort, n base 2 log. That's a lower bound. That's the information theory lower bound for sorting. There are algorithms that achieve this performance. They've been known for 60 years, 50 years, something like that. Merge sort and heap sort both take n log n comparisons in the worst case. And quick sort takes n log n comparisons in the average case. Classical stuff. But now let me modify the question a little bit. What if we know we have some information given to us in advance? What if we know the outcomes of some comparisons in advance? How do we then sort utilizing the given comparisons? This is the problem I want. It's been called sorting using partial information or sorting under partial information. And I want to think of the problem this way, sorting a DAG. So we'll model the problem by constructing a directed graph, which has one vertex for each item and one arc from V to W for each comparison that is already specified. V less than W. So we have an arc from V to W if we know that V is less than W. This graph has to be, so a DAG is just a directed acyclic graph. This graph has to be acyclic because otherwise there would be a contradiction. We're assuming that all the elements, all the items are distinct. So we can't have a cycle because it's a totally ordered set. Now, it may not be transitively reduced nor transitively closed. I have an example here. So the letters are alphabet, actually the hidden total order. The red arrow here is a transitive arc because this arc is given to us along with these two, but this arc is redundant because if A is less than D and D is less than J, then A is less than J by transitivity. This arc is not given to us, that's dashed, but we could put it in if we wanted to because B less than E, E less than M implies that B less than M by transitivity. Now, we don't want to take the time to either add all the transitive arcs or to remove all the redundant arcs. That's called transitive reduction because that computation takes us at least, well, you can do it with matrix multiplication, which is super quadratic in the number of vertices time as far as anybody knows. That computation by itself is more expensive than just sorting from scratch in n log n comparisons, assuming that comparisons cost as much as other kinds of computation. So the graph is not necessarily transitively closed, not necessarily transitively reduced, but it is a DAG. Okay. So what do we know about DAGs? They have topological orders. The critical basic result in graph theory is that a directed graph either has a cycle or it has some topological order. This is an order of the vertices such that every arc leads from a smaller vertex in the order to a larger vertex in the order. And our unknown target order is a topological order of this DAG, and without knowing anything else, it could be any topological order of this DAG. That means that if T is the number of possible topological orders, then log T is a lower bound on the number of binary comparisons we need to sort given this partial information. So that's our target. We would like to sort the log of the number of topological orders of the given graph. And we're going to have to look at it. So we'll spend time proportional to its size. I'll denote by n the number of vertices, the number of items. If an item is uncompared so far, it's just a single vertex. And by m, the number of arcs. So here's one possible topological order. This respects the direction of all the arcs, but it is not, in fact, a sorted order because, for example, M precedes D, but A comes first, B comes second, then H, and so on and so forth. There are, I don't know how many there are, but there are some number of topological orders of this day, and log of their number is a lower bound on the number of comparisons we're going to need to sort the items by binary comparisons. Now, this problem has an interesting history. Fredman, in a paper in 1976, so almost 50 years ago, considered an even more general sorting problem. He asked the question, if we're given an arbitrary subset, S, of possible total orders of a set of n items, we want to determine one specific one, an unknown total order, by doing binary comparisons of the items. So in our case, the subset is the set of topological orders of this given input. So Fredman's problem is even more general. He proved that you can in fact do it in log of the number of comparisons of the size of the subset here. That's our lower bound. Plus n, where n is the number of items. So this, depending upon whether you want to deal with the plus n, this is, this part is optimum. This part is maybe extra. But, so this was just well, there's an algorithm buried in here, but it's a super exponential algorithm. What he said is that the algorithm in theorem 3.1 requires considerable enumerative information about the set. I don't know what the set F is, but for its construction. So non-efficient, it's sort of a non-construct, well, it's a constructive proof, but not an efficient way. So we couldn't use it as an algorithm. Now, actually, before Fredman, Kistlitson in 1968, later Fredman, but not in the paper I referred to, and Lineal 8 years later, independently made the 1/3, 2/3 conjecture. So what this says is, for the DAG sorting problem, there is always a comparison that will split the candidate set at least as equally as 1/3, 2/3. So if you get any constant fraction split, you do the comparison, you figure out which side you're on, you find another good comparison, you keep iterating. The number of comparisons required will be some constant times log of the minimum number. So any constant split here works. 1/3, 2/3 is as good as you can get, as you can see with a very simple example. You can't get 50-50 in general, for example. But any constant factor is good enough. So Jeff Kahn and Mike Sachs in 1984 proved a weaker version of the conjecture. They proved you could get a 3/11, 8/11 split. And there have been improvements since. According to Wikipedia, the most recent one was by Breithoff, Felsner, and Trotter in 1995. Their split is 1/2 minus √5/10, which is about 0.276 on the small side. And there's a journal called Order, which looks at questions of ordering, and apparently not only does this problem remain unsolved, but they called it one of the most intriguing problems in the combinatorial theory of post-sets, partially ordered sets. So the mathematical point of view, or the mathematician's approach, you'll allow me to say that, is to look for a good comparison. Trouble is, all of these methods don't give good algorithms, because finding the good comparison takes super polynomial time with all of those.
So this is just for a pair. So there's some pair for which half the orders that are.
Yes.
Otherwise
There's
viable.
one comparison that you can make between two elements that will separate the remaining set of candidates into two sets. Smaller set has at least a third of the candidates. The big set has at most 2/3 of the candidates.
Gotcha.
Right. So there's always a good comparison, but it seems to be hard to find. Nobody has a polynomial time way to find a good comparison. But you don't need a good comparison. All you need, in the worst case, all you need is, you got to do a lot of comparisons. So you need them to be good in some average sense, or actually in some amortized sense. Right? You can afford some bad ones if most of the time they're pretty good. So if you look at the question more holistically, which is what we're going to do, you can get an efficient algorithm to do the sorting and match the lower bound. That's the goal here. Right. This is our goal, a simple algorithm that uses constant times the lower bound comparisons, and whose time bound is linear in the number of comparisons plus the sizes of the input data. So there was earlier progress on this. Jeff Kahn, same Jeff Kahn, and Jay Kim in '92 proposed an algorithm for doing the sorting problem. They use the ellipsoid method to find good comparisons. It's at least polynomial time, because the ellipsoid method is polynomial, but it's a sledgehammer. So Cardinal et al. 20 years later found several polynomial time algorithms. None of them use the ellipsoid method. They're simpler, but not so simple. Both of these achieve the goal of order log t comparisons, but the best algorithm here is n to the 2.5 in terms of running time. So why bother using the pre-existing comparisons? Just sort in n log n. This would only make sense if comparisons are incredibly expensive compared to other operations on your data, which might actually happen, but still, this is a huge price to pay. So the question is, can we do it in linear time and match the comparison? Okay, so I'm going to tell you how to do this. The first step, going back in history, is topological ordering on a directed acyclic graph. Find any topological order, vertices of it. This is part of PERT analysis, program evaluation and review technique. This was the Navy term for this. This goes back to World War II and just after the war, the beginnings of operations research. The Air Force called it PEP. I don't know what PEP stands for. Anyway, we have this theorem that says that any directed graph either has a cycle or has a total topological order. What is an algorithm to find either a cycle or a topological order? Different Kahn, in 1964 presented sort of an obvious algorithm for this problem. There has to be a vertex with no incoming arc. Take one such vertex, call it a source. Put it first, remove it from the graph. Find another source, put it second, remove it from the graph, keep going. How do we keep track of sources? We run through all the arcs. We compute for each vertex the number of incoming arcs. any vertex that has zero incoming arcs as a source. We put all those sources into a candidate pool, pull one out. It's the next one. Look at all the outgoing arcs, decrement the counts. If anybody's count goes to zero, it goes in. Now, Kahn's algorithm was not quite linear time because he didn't keep track. He iterated over the entire set of vertices each time he wanted to find a source. Knuth, 5 years later, in his classical art of computer programming, said, well, let's just keep the set of candidates in a queue, but any set will work. So now we only have to take the first vertex off the queue. We can take any vertex out of the set, and that's the next source. Okay. So that's, and Knuth and Schwarzweiger, who was one of his grad students, showed that not only can you get a topological ordering this way, but if you pick the next source in all possible ways, you can get all possible topological ordering. So this is kind of a complete process to get topological orders. So back to our example here, the initial sources are A, B, and H. Those are the only vertices of in degree 0. If we pull off A, the in degree of D goes down from 2 to 1, but it's still not a source. If we pull out B, the in degree of D and E goes down by 1, and now they both become sources. If we pull off H, the in degree of I goes down by 1, and it becomes a source. And if you use, instead of a queue to store the sources, if you use a stack to store the sources, you get this order. So I'm assuming that initially the vertices, the initial sources went into the stack A, B, H. We pull H off, I becomes a source. It goes on the front of the stack. We pull I off. M is not a source. J is not a source yet. The next thing we pull off is B. We pull off B, that makes E a source. And we're preferring the new sources rather than the old sources. Anyway, so this is a stack-based topological order. If you use a queue, you would get a different order. Now, there's an obvious strategy for turning this into a sorting algorithm, which is we store our sources in a data structure, which is called a heap or a priority queue, which supports the operation of finding and removing the minimum. So the two operations we need are inserting into our heap, finding and removing the minimum. And then the rest of it is just keeping track of the in degrees, which is linear time. Now, as I said, we've converted this particular problem, this sorting with partial information problem, into a data structure problem. We now need an efficient priority queue or heap, which supports insertion fast and delete the minimum fast. And there are such data structures. Insertion turns out you can do in constant time. And deletions take log n time, where n is the size of the heap, which could be as big as the number of items. So this is going to give us a total time, which is, well, we've got linear and edges for the extra processing and n log n for basically the heap operations, which do all the comparisons of the items. Well, this is nice, but it doesn't, this is worst case here. So how do we proceed we want to get a number of comparisons that's not n log n. If there are very few possible topological orders, we want log of the number of topological orders instead of n log n here. How are we going to do that? Well, first of all, here's what happens on this example. So A, B, and H go in the heap initially. Now A is the smallest one, so it comes out. Nothing new goes in. B is the next smallest, it comes out. Now D and E are sources, they go in with H. D is the smallest, it comes out. And so on. When we remove D, G becomes a source, J becomes a source. So we got D, J, E, and H. The smallest one is E. E would be the next one. Come out. So. All right, so we need a more efficient heap implementation. What if our heap is adaptive in some sense? What if there's some more local bound on the time for deletion than just the number of items in the heap at the time the deletion takes place? Is there some kind of better bound, some efficient heap that realizes the better bound? And if we had it, could we use this in our topological heap sort algorithm? Here's an interesting example. This is a long path plus a bunch of singleton vertices. So what happens with this example? Well, the set of sources consists of just the first vertex on the long path plus all of these. If we use, and they would all go into the heap at the beginning. If we use a standard heap, and that the order happens to be that all of these vertices are smaller than all of these all sit in the heap for a long time. The cost, let's say there are k vertices here, the cost to delete each one of these is log k. So we get log k all the way to the end, essentially n log k. Then we delete these at the end. So standard heap, n log k comparisons. On the other hand, there are other ways to solve this problem. We could, for example, sort this set first. That's k log k comparisons. And then we could do a merge of this list into this list, which can actually be done fast. We can reduce the time on this example to k n plus k log k, which depending upon what n and k are, this is a better bound than this one. And we'll see a way to do this, the topological heap sort with the right choice. So let me say something else about what is happening. Only one of these vertices is going to be in our heap at one time. This is the same example. The answer to both our questions is going to be yes. What kind of a more local bound do we need? Go back to this example. G, H, I, J, A all go in the heap at the same time. But there's only one vertex on this path that's going to be in the heap at any given time, because for B to become a source, you got to have processed A, removed it from the heap. And for C to become a source, B has to. So these items all went into the heap before any of these other items on the path. So if we look at the set of items that are in the heap, when, for example, C is deleted, that were new items that were inserted after C is inserted, that set consists only of C itself. These are all old items. So if you have some kind of more localized bound that depends on the new items rather than the old items, maybe we can address this issue. So this is the so-called working set bound. We've got a sequence of insertions into minimum deletions from our heap. Let's let X be an item in the heap. So the standard cost of deleting X would be the size of the heap, the number of elements in it when the deletion takes place. But I'm going to define the working set. Sorry, log of the size. Thank you. So the relevant set is the entire set of vertices in the heap. But I want to take just a subset, which is the set of vertices inserted into the heap after X was inserted. X is still in the heap. So the elements that were inserted before X don't count. And what I want is that the cost of deleting X is log of the working set size. So we'll say a heap has the working set bound. The time to insert an item is constant. It's going to be amortized. This is over a long sequence of operations. And the cost to delete the minimum is log of the working set size. If we had such a heap and we used this heap in topological heap sort on that example that I had with the long path and some set of vertices about which I know nothing, we're going to match the best possible bound on that example. So what I want to assert now is that in fact, there are heap implementations that have the working set bound. And if you pick any one of them and plug it into the topological heap sort algorithm, you satisfy the goal. You get an algorithm that does a minimum number of comparisons to within a constant factor, and its total time bound is linear.
But
Yes.
so you explain why it would be good to have such a bound, but is there any intuition why the working set size is relevant? I mean, just things that were put in the heap later, but later has nothing to do with the order.
This is one of the mysterious points here, and I will attempt to give you some intuition. I think I have some slides on the piece of the analysis that kind of answers that question. So if you'll bear with me, I'll ask it again later. I think it's an excellent question.
Right, sorry, it's just to follow up, because when you look at a new node that gets put in the heap, you're just looking at the comparisons to things before that are in the heap.
Yes.
Right, but okay. So this is why it's strange, because you're looking now at exactly what comes out.
Well, so there are two orders going on here, right? There's the key order, if you will, and there's the time order, the insertion order.
Yeah.
So to get such a data structure, here's one way to do it. Insert things into a binary search tree such that symmetric order is insertion order. And then keep some extra information in the tree so that you can get to the minimum fast. For example, if we store in each node the minimum in the subtree, that's probably good enough. And then if you search from the left-hand end, the most recent, instead of searching from the root of the binary search tree, if you start your search from the left-hand end, you walk up the path and then you go down to the thing you're targeting. The length of this search path is going to be logarithmic in the number of elements in front of you, which is in fact, this is the working set. So this is the idea of how you could get such a data structure, but that doesn't answer Bobby's question. And I'm not going to have time to talk about the details of the heap implementation.
We are not too rigid about the exact time.
Okay. Let's see how we go. Now, I want to go one step further with this because I want to restrict this bound even further. Because if you noticed in the talk, there's an even more general problem that I want to address. And I need this idea, the strict working set bound. There's another set of items I want to exclude from being in the working set, and that's the items that are inserted but never deleted. So if we're completely sorting things, everything that goes into the heap is going to come out of the heap. But this algorithm produces things in sorted order, increasing sorted order. So I want to consider the possibility of stopping at some point. That would give me stopping after K items have been deleted from the heap. So that would give me the top K, or the bottom K, actually, the smallest K in sorted order. If I reverse the order, that would be the biggest K in sorted order. And then there's still extra stuff in the heap, and I want to be able to ignore that. So that gives me this definition, the strict working set bound. The strict working set is the set of items inserted after X that are eventually deleted, either before or after X is deleted. Any item that survives to the end of the process has no effect. just kind of sits in the data structure and tags along. That's
Sorry, when is an item deleted? I didn't-
when it's found to be the minimum.
Gotcha.
So how does the topological heap sort work? We're sticking items in when they become sources. And every step we're deleting the minimum item, putting it on our sorted list. That causes more insertions. Possible,
I see.
because we create new sources. So there's this. What is happening to the heap is there's a sequence of insertions intermixed with deletions. We're doing total sorting, we're doing n insertions and n deletions mixed up. So
when is an item not deleted?
if we stop the process early,
So that you are defining a more general problem of give me the case models elements. Or
yes,
any case.
yes.
And in that case, yeah, things will remain it, yes.
So this is actually a problem that people want to solve in things like preference lists and so on. Top K, it's called. And there are settings, applications where comparisons are expensive. If comparisons require actual human beings making a judgment, you don't want to ask for comparisons. Pseudo application, shall we say. Anyway, there's the definition. We can achieve this one also. So 2 questions. Are there any heap implementations that have the working set bound strict? The answer is yes. Are they good for anything? Yes, because they're going to solve our sorting problem for us. So this idea of the working set bound goes back actually to mid 1980s, because Danny Slater and I invented a binary search tree data structure that's self-adjusting. It's called a splay tree. And it has a similarly named but different bound. We proved a theorem that shows that these trees have a certain kind of working set bound. John Iacono, who was a student of Mike Fredman's at Rutgers, picked up this notion 15 odd years later and defined actually a more complicated working set property and proved that certain kind of heaps have it, so-called pairing heaps, which is another self-adjusting data structure. The bounds are amortized, provided that the heap ends up empty. That is, you have to delete everything. Otherwise, in the middle, the cost can have been too expensive. But at least for the total sorting problem, this simple data structure as of 2000 was known to have this working set bound. Iacono proved this as just because it seemed interesting to him, but no, this is the first application that anybody has come up with for this bound. So
So you said that if one has this bound, then you actually sort in the required time.
yes.
So that this algorithm sort of does m plus
Yes,
whatever row t.
yes. We will get there. But let me finish up. So it turns out it's not too hard to get the working set bound. You can, I kind of sketched the idea. You can use a balanced search tree or a self-adjusting search tree where the symmetric order in the tree is the time order of insertion, and you have this extra information to give you find the minimum. You can get, so it's not so hard to get the working set bound if you work at it. And actually, El Masri in 2006 devised a somewhat complicated heap with the strict working set bound. So you don't have to worry about things that are never deleted. But it also turns out that search trees used as heaps and a variant of the pairing heaps called double pairing heaps have the strict bound. So getting these bounds is not so hard if you know something about heap data structures, and I can say a little bit about that if I don't run out of time. So if we run topological heap sort with a pairing heap, the running time is linear in the size of the input plus number of needed comparisons. Number of comparisons is within an additive n of the optimum bound. So ultimately, we want to get rid of this additive n, but I'll come back to this. And now I'll attempt to prove this or sketch a proof of this, which is going to hopefully answer your question, Bobby. So we need to somehow tie this log t lower bound to what the algorithm is doing. We're going to obtain a lower bound missing a word here. We want to look at a specific run of the algorithm and somehow tie the working set bound for its deletions to this log t. How is that? So we're given a run of the algorithm. Let's number the vertices from 1 to n in the order of insertion into the heap. Different from the deletion, right? The items going in. This is the time sequence of insertion. Deletion order is in.
That's not too far. That's actually kind of.
Now, what is the working set of a vertex I? So I goes in and I plus 1, I plus 2, dot, 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 up to the point where this I that went in here is deleted. I'll call the last inserted item before I is deleted B sub I. So the point is and some of these may have been removed in the middle, but they're going to count anyway. So this entire interval of elements from I to B of I, this is the set of items that is in the working set. The size of the working set is then B of I minus I plus 1, because you're going to count both ends. The stuff that was inserted ahead of time doesn't count. This is the reason the proof works, that the working set is this chunk here, this interval of time and the early stuff.
Just to clarify, the working set is a function. For every element, you have a working set.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
but you are focusing on some element.
And for every I, so
For every
I
I,
from
yeah.
1 to n, you got a BI, there's a working set that defines these intervals. Now I'm going to define a graph on the intervals. I call it the interval graph. H. And it works. So the general situation now is we've got the integers 1 through n. We've got a bunch of intervals of integers from I to j or from I to b of I. And it happens that they all have distinct starting points, but that's what happens here. But the theorem is that I'm going to state is more general. The theorem that we're going to use. So I wanted to find this graph. So the vertices are these intervals. And an interval, there's an arc from one interval to another if the one interval is entirely to the left of the other interval. That is, B of I is less than J. Okay, any set of intervals, if they overlap, there's no edge. If they don't overlap, there's an edge from one to the other, or it goes the other way. Now, if I map I to the interval I B of I, that's going to map my graph G, my original DAG, to H, and it's a subgraph of H. Why is it a subgraph of H? Because I is deleted just after B of I is added. So if J isn't, if there's an edge from I to J in my original graph G, then J doesn't become a source until I delete I. So this entire, that is, I has to go away before J gets inserted. So BI has to be smaller than J. So there's an arc in H. There's an arc in G, there's an arc in H. There's an arc in G, there's an arc.
Oh, it did start, oh,
MHG is subgraph of H. That means every topological order of G is a topological order of H. That is to say, I got this right here. That's an inequality going in the right direction.
Should be the other way around. So
Should be the other way around. If it's any topological order of H is a topological order of G. Thank you. I'll have to correct this. So now I want to somehow relate the sizes of these intervals to the number of topological orders of H. And here's the crucial lemma. This is a lemma that was proved by Van der Hoeve, Rottenberg, Rushman, 2024. Kind of jumped on the bandwagon by looking at the preliminary version of our paper where we had a more complicated proof, but this is exactly the right lemma to capture what is going on. The number of topological orders of H is at least a product of the sizes of the intervals. And they use a volumetric argument to prove this lemma. You can use a probabilistic argument to prove it. It's a nice exercise to prove this. In any case, if we take logs, a log of the number of topological orders of H is at least the sum of the logs of these things, which are the working set sizes. So that tells us that, and I'm probably missing a constant factor here. There should be maybe a big O here somewhere. That gives us the result. And actually, there's an N here that I forgot to incorporate. So take this with a certain grain of salt. But get a theorem like this, and this is exactly what we were after, and that gives us this bound on the time for the deletion operations in the topological. So modulo various bugs that have crept into my presentation. So this is the critical result. Now let me talk a bit about how we get rid of this N here, because that's kind of interesting. So, again, here's the example. We've seen this before. The standard heap is going to take N log K comparisons. The working set heap, it takes N plus K log K comparisons. What happens if log T is small? So thing is pretty close to totally ordered already. Well, this can only happen if there's a long path in the DAG. There's got to be a path in the DAG that contains all but a small constant fraction of vertices. This is not too hard to prove. If you can construct layers in the DAG. So for each vertex, you compute the length of a longest path to it. So that every arc goes from a vertex with a shorter path to a vertex with a longer path. So all the arcs proceed forward. And the longest path goes from the first layer, which you could call layer 0 or layer 1, to the last layer at the end. If you look at the vertices in a layer, there aren't any edges between because everything is stretched out. So you can permute the vertices arbitrarily. You can get a topological order of the DAG by taking any permutation of the layer 0 vertices followed by any permutation of layer 1 vertices and so on. So if every layer has at least 2 vertices in it, for example, you got an exponential number of topological orders, so log T is linear and you don't have to worry about the N. The only situation in which the number of topological orders is small is where you have a lot of layers with only a single vertex. which means both you have a long path and you have a lot of these bottleneck vertices that are the only vertex in their layer. So the idea is to either find the vertices on the long path or just the bottleneck vertices. And then essentially run topological heap sort on the other vertices, the non-bottleneck vertices, because you know the sorted order of the bottlenecks without doing any comparisons, because you can build this layered structure with no comparisons whatsoever, just by looking at the DAG. And then you merge the sorted order of the non-bottleneck vertices with the bottleneck vertices, and we know how to do merge in an optimal way. So that's one way to think about how this is working. And that reduces the number of comparisons. That gets rid of the additive in the bound on number of comparisons. All right, now let me extend to the top K problem. We can stop this algorithm early because if you do this process incrementally, if you find the bottlenecks incrementally and you run the merge process incrementally, which you can do, you can generate the vertices in increasing order. So let's generalize the question and ask, I'm giving you a K, I want you to report the first K vertices in increasing order, the top K or bottom K problem. Well, we'll run this algorithm up to the point where it delivers K vertices to it. That requires not finding all the bottlenecks, only essentially we have to explore up to K vertices in this layered structure. So there are various technicalities. But the main thing we need is vertices can go into the heap now that never get deleted. So we need the strict working set property of our heap. But if we modify the algorithm and we use a heap with the strict working set bound, we in fact get an algorithm for the top K problem, which comes within its running time is minimum to within a constant factor, and the number of comparisons is within a constant factor.
But here the number of comparisons is not T.
It's
the
not
number
T, there's
the
a-
number of total orders for this K.
It's the number of prefix, K-length prefixes of topological something.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is with respect to the actual lower bound for the top K problem.
So you achieve it simultaneously for all K.
Yes, you have to know K ahead of time. I guess we're assuming you have to know K ahead of time, but maybe we don't actually, because you could probably do a doubling trick, which is do it for one, do it for two, do it. Anyway, the problem that we solved is you're given K. Find the first K. Whether you can make this truly adaptive is how do you win this? Yeah. I don't know. So let me give you, so these are the results. You can do sorting a DAG, optimum time and comparisons. We can do the top K sorting problem and optimum time and comparisons. The algorithms are simple. And the analyses are kind of interesting, but not terribly complicated. We can't address the 2/3, 1/3 question. The efficiency here is in an amortized sense, right? We're looking at the total number of comparisons and showing that matches the bound. We can't say anything about individual comparisons. The genesis of this work actually was this group that I got involved in was trying to prove Dijkstra's shortest path algorithm optimum in the sense that it minimizes the number of comparisons in a sort of an instance optimal way. So the model here is that you're given a specific directed graph, specific start vertex. You want to compute, but you don't know the arc lengths. So the arc lengths is a variable here. You're interested in the worst case performance on the specific graph, depending upon the arc lengths. And the problem we looked at was, normally you think of constructing shortest paths or constructing a shortest path tree. We turned it into a sorting problem where you want to report the vertices in order by distance from the start vertex. So that problem, the same techniques prove that the version of Dijkstra's algorithm is optimal on any specific graph up to the fact that the edge weights, the arc weights are not known. And in order to do this result, we had to invent a new kind of heap that has not only the working set property, but also allows you to do decreased key operations efficiently. So with Dijkstra's algorithm, if you find a new path to a vertex, the tentative distance decreases. You got to incorporate that information into the heap. You want that to be constant time because it happens once per arc in the worst case. So that heap implementation got kind of complicated, and that's one piece that we would like to fix. And it seems like one can, so this is a more complicated problem than the sorting problem. John Iacono saw our paper on this and said, well, you can do the sorting problem with the same idea. So that's what we did. And the sorting problem, as I've stated, it is actually simpler than what happens here. And it seems like we can do something like top K, which is to say, source to destination problem. I think we should be able to prove some kind of optimality result, both for one-way Dijkstra and for two-way Dijkstra, where you simultaneously search forward from the start vertex and backward from destination vertex and meet in the middle. Anyway, I don't think we've explored all the possibilities here. And certainly my colleagues think that this idea of proving optimality in restricted situations with using adaptive methods, adaptive data structure should have other applications. So I can stop at this point, or I could say a little bit about pairing heaps.
We're pretty much out of time, so let's leave it to the questions.
Thank you.
Let's take. Questions.
Yes.
I have a question. So the running time of your algorithm depends on the number of comparisons, but also on the number of vertices and directed edges.
Yes.
So it seems to me maybe a bit counterintuitive that if I'm giving you more information, more edges, this will actually take longer. Are there thoughts on somehow removing this dependency?
It is counterintuitive. I don't have any good ideas about this. As I said, if you're given too much information, it's useless. You might as well just sort from scratch, right? But this does, for example, I mean, there's a thread of work involving merging multiple sequences, right? People looked at optimum merging algorithms and so on. If you're willing to ignore constant factors, this is a general purpose algorithm that will do merging optimally. And also, if you have a tree, for example, and you want to sort the vertices in the tree, and the tree is the partial order, you can do that optimally. There are a lot of interesting examples where this general purpose algorithm solves it optimally. And those are the interesting cases are when the input data is sparse somehow. Yes.
Is there an intuitive explanation to this Iacono lemma why the number of topological sorts is at least the product of the interval length?
You could think of it as a volumetric argument or a probabilistic argument. So let me see if I can. It's that lemma is not Iacono. That lemma is Venn. You're asking.
Oh, yeah, they're not Iacono. Yeah.
Okay, so
I can see that you can, this product along a path in H is definitely a low bound, but
So, let me think of, let me see if I can attempt to explain this a little bit. Right? So, I've got these intervals. I've got these intervals. And I want to extend the intervals by 1/2 on either side. So that the length of this thing between the parentheses, this is exactly the working set size here. So now I'm gonna map each one of my elements into some position from -1/2 to n+1/2, uniformly distributed, right? And look at the probability that I get something consistent with interval order. And this has to do with the lengths of these intervals. So you make a little argument like that. I don't know that I can reproduce the details on the fly, but it's cute. It's cute. Somehow there's a certain magic here somehow. It's hard.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is there any randomized algorithms that seem helpful in this?
That is a very good question. So with binary search trees, there are randomized binary search trees. I talked to John Iacona a lot about this question. Is there some kind of a randomized heap structure? We had some ideas, they all fell apart. As far as I know, there isn't one, and it's a good question, and I don't know why there isn't one. Randomization is certainly a powerful technique and gives us a proof here, but it's not in the algorithm.
Okay, any more questions? Okay, let's thank Bob.
Thank you.